If you've been in your home 20, 30, 40 years plus, you know there's a conversation waiting to be had. The question is, are you having the right one? Most people who are thinking about downsizing are focusing on a few things. Of course, the big one is location. There's a couple others like size and price. And these are all really important things to think about, but there are a lot of hidden things and ideas that they have to remember and take into consideration when they're thinking about making such a major move. And those are the things that we're going to dive in today. All of the hidden little things that might derail the perfect downsize. I'm Riley Smith. I've been a realtor here in Miami for almost 25 years, and I have helped countless people navigate the challenges of downsizing from that big family home or big property into the next phase of their life, whether it's a condo, small house, or even transitioning out of state. All these things are scenarios we've seen before, and we're going to dive into those and talk to you about them. Let's start with the hardest question first, and this is the one I see everybody struggle with in this scenario. How do you know when the right time is to give up and move on and look for something smaller or in a different location that better suits your current situation? This is something that trips up everybody, and it's really, really difficult for a lot of people to handle. Let's start with a question that's harder to answer than it sounds. How do you really know when the time is right? Most people assume the signal is obvious, but I can tell you after working with so many downsizers over the last 25 years, it's almost never that easy. When I sit with people who are talking about downsizing, usually they call me into the home way before the process starts, just to sort of get an idea of what they're looking at and what's going on. And usually we have some amazing conversations. And remember, these are people who have been in their home for 10, 15, 20 years. So these conversations, as you can imagine, are really going through all kinds of memories and things that are happening there. And we're trying to really understand when is the right time to make this move. There's the obvious ones when the kids fly the nest or when you're retired. There's certainly when your financial situation has improved. These things are pretty obvious. There's also a lot of other subtle little things that are there. And sometimes it's just an emotional feeling. When are you actually really ready to let go? So these are some of the things that we talk about when I'm sitting in their homes. In my experience, there's usually two ends of the spectrum. There's some of the people who rush to go ahead and make this decision, and that always comes with some consequences, I think. And there's other people that it just is so hard for them to fathom the idea of leaving the home with so many memories that probably they stay there too long. And I think that's the one mostly that probably costs more to them in the long run, because there's deferred maintenance, there's other things that happen to the house. Maybe they're not timing the market just correct. So I would say whether it's rushing or taking your time, you really need to have someone help you navigate this, but it's also up to you as to when the feeling is really right. So sometimes our conversations are really interesting. It's a lot about when are they ready. I'm trying to find out. They always ask me, when is the best time? I'm trying to time the market, make the move. And I always say the best time, I think, when you're doing a downsize or considering downsizing is when is the best and right time for you. When are you going to be really comfortable letting go, packing up so many of those little knickknacks and memories that you've had, closing down the kids' rooms and getting ready for the next chapter? This is where we really spend a lot of time just talking through the emotions of it, because it's the emotional challenge and the emotional anguish that really upsets and disrupts this process the most. Once we've made the decision it's time to go, then the logical next thing is we talk about all things money. And this is where I think you really need to get some good, solid advice. There's so many moving parts when you're talking about money, whether it's your price that you're going to sell for, the new price you're going to pay, the taxes, all these other implications, which we're going to get into. But this is where we spend the bulk of our time, so we make sure everybody understands where they're going to land and what it's going to look like. I think what happens also is that people who have lived in a house a very long time, they've literally spent decades, not just building memories, but building equity. And once you have the equity in your house, okay, what are we going to do with the equity? Are we going to use it? Are we going to change it? Are we going to invest it in different ways? Are we going to take all of that equity, go ahead and purchase the new home? Are we going to pay off mortgages? There's so many things to talk about with that equity that's sitting there. And that's where a lot of conversations I have with my clients lead us finally to get to the right path. When we start talking finances, there's some very big things we need to think about. Of course, it's money, and everybody wants to know the first obvious one is what is the value of their current home? But that's just where we begin, because that home is obviously escalated in value so much so over time. We're assuming they probably have their homestead protection on there. Their capital gains is something they're going to have to think about, and it's something that a lot of people don't take into consideration when they first just run their own numbers and think about making a downsized move. So capital gains, super important. We need to understand what is that going to look like, what is that going to cost, how much of that equity is that going to eat into. And then there's all of the other things. Of course, now you're going to give up your tax homestead exemption and you're going to start a new one somewhere else. What is the tax implication there? Sometimes you have the challenge of going from a big house to a small house, but your taxes are still going to be the same because you've been grandfathered in with that 3% for so long 3% increase that is, for so long that your tax base hasn't caught up with the rest of the community. So these are just two of the things. There's insurance, there's moving costs, there's where you're going to land. These are all the things that we spend talking about, but it's really, really important to understand the financials and get all the details before you can make a perfect decision. Carrying costs, of course, is one of the big things. And a lot of people I find have been in their homes for 10, 15, 20 years and more. They maybe have paid off their home. Let's say they don't have a mortgage, but there's so many other carrying costs in that existing home. And then we have to look at the carrying costs in the new place where they're going to land. Most often, carrying costs in these homes, of course, the bigger one, of course, is insurance and taxes. So we understand what those look like. There's also understanding the maintenance of the home and the carrying costs, such as all of the day-to-day things that have to happen making. So you need to understand what that's costing you so that you can translate that to the new property. And then, of course, here in South Florida, a lot of people are downsizing probably to condos from big houses or townhouses, or they're going to a smaller situation. So you got to understand, what are your new carrying costs going to be? Are you moving into a condo? You've never experienced condo fees, assessments. What does that look like? And how is that going to impact it? You still have insurance. There's going to be different insurance information and things you need to know about for condos than for homes. And of course, there's what is the new tax going to be? And everybody wants to understand this portability of their homestead and their taxes. It's a really confusing topic. So these are some of the things we have to think about as we work through this process. This is where things really get interesting. Sometimes when we dive into the numbers, we start to come to the realization that perhaps downsizing just doesn't make sense right now. Sometimes there's an absolute need, whether it's a health problem or a financial problem, or you want to be closer to the kids or the grandkids, or you've just always wanted to live somewhere else. But if we take those out of the question and we just look at a pure financial analysis of the situation, quite often, I sit with my clients and we come to the conclusion that downsizing may cost them as much or more as what they're paying right now. They have that really low interest rate if they do have a mortgage. They have that set taxes that don't go up very fast. They're not resetting. Their insurances they've been dealing with for a very long time. Or if they own the home outright, they don't have to pay insurance. So their carrying costs may not be what their new carrying costs will be. And then you have to look in pricing. Some of these older homes, they've been there a long time. They have deferred maintenance. They need upgrading. Maybe you're going to have to put some money into it to get the best price. When you move to a downsize, you usually don't want a project. And so now you have to think you're going to pay a premium to get something that's move-in ready. And I think these are things that sometimes bring us to the conclusion that staying right where you are is not a bad idea. The decision has been made. We have analyzed the financials. We understand everything. We've talked to the family. We've all made our decision. It's time to move. Now we have to look at some of the hidden things that trip us up when we're going to buy that new, smaller property. A mistake I see a lot of people make is when they're trying to do a downsize, quite often, they're looking at everything that they're giving up or everything that they have and trying to just take that and move it into a smaller place. But really, you really need to think about, how can I almost make a clean break from this life that I've had and start over and come at it with a whole different approach. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself constantly looking at properties that probably really don't make sense to move. Where are we going to go once we made this decision? If you're staying here in South Florida, it's a pretty easy decision. You've got three things to think about. Am I going to go to a smaller house? Am I going to go to a condo, or am I going to go to a townhouse? Generally, there's a couple things we need to think about with each one of those that I want to talk about right now. So if you're going to downsize to a townhouse, you got to think about a few things. A lot of townhouses are vertical. Does it have an elevator? Are you comfortable still running up and down the stairs? A lot of townhouses are in certainly the walkable parts of town, so you are getting this increased walkability, which a lot of people like. You do have a shared wall. You spent your whole life living on your own property with your own yard, and you've never had to deal with a neighbor being so close. Is that something you're going to be comfortable with? The communities that the townhouses are in, they're a little bit louder. They're a little bit more condensed. There's a lot more density there, a lot more people around you. Is that something you're okay with? So these are the things we think about with townhouses. Obviously, we're going to go to condo, and I think this is where most people land, because a lot of people, when they're ready to downsize, they want less space. Maybe they've always wanted that water view or a view of some kind, and they usually want something simple they can lock and go and start that phase of travel that everybody's been waiting for. So condos are generally where we land, and it's probably a good, safe place to land because the maintenance is so much less. That's why you pay that exorbitant condo fee, so somebody else takes care of everything for you. They take care of the pool, they take care of the shutters, they take care of front desk and people coming and going, and they just make your quality of life a lot better. So I see more people steering towards condos. Now, we have all kinds of condos here in South Florida. We have full-service buildings that are giant high-rises with lots of people. We have boutique buildings that have a few units in them. They have their own set of challenges. So navigating what is going to be comfortable for you in a whole new world and a whole new setting. Remember, some of these people have never even lived in a condo. Some of these people have lived in the same house for 20, 30, 40 years. So this is where it gets really tricky. Also, condos are a very big downsize. You're rarely going from a very big house to a very big condo. You're probably going from a very big house to a condo that only fits 1/10 of your stuff. What does that look like? Can I live without all that stuff? So we have to navigate that when you look at condos. The third option, of course, is single family homes. You can go from a big single family home to a smaller one. You can go from one in the suburbs, maybe to one a little closer to town, where a little more action and more nightlife and other things that you're looking for that you gave up while you were raising a family or just living in the suburbs. So these are things we all think about. What does the maintenance on those look like? We have to talk about that. Do you want to continue cutting the grass, worrying about the pool, these things? This is what we talk about when we're talking about what does it look like when I'm downsizing and what kind of properties am I thinking about. I think there are a lot of things that sellers think they're going to miss about their house. They find out later they don't really miss. If we'd be honest with ourselves, when you're getting to the point of ready to downsize, you're probably not even using 20, 30, 40, or even 50% of your home anymore. When was the last time you ran upstairs to the empty kids' bedrooms? You went into that formal living room. I think that a lot of people think spaces they're gonna miss and storage they're gonna miss. Where's all my stuff gonna go? But we can get you a storage locker, outside of the condo building. Some of them have storage lockers there, but it's really probably a good time to purge some of your things. And most people I talk to a year after they've been settled, they tell me they don't miss any of that stuff. They feel liberated. They have less house to clean, less things to worry about. They have less stuff around. They get to start rebuilding and filling this condo with new things that sort of match their new lifestyle. So there's a lot of things that I think sellers think they're going to miss that really, once they land in the right place, they realize that was silly thinking and they're moving forward with smooth sailing. Since we're talking so much about condos, and I generally think if you're staying local, that's where you probably want to end up, we should take a minute to talk about the condo warning. When I say condo warning, I want you to understand that there's a lot of moving parts in condos today that were not there 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. We all know what happened with Surfside, and since then the fallout has been massive. Condo associations are under a lot of scrutiny, the boards are under a lot of scrutiny, the financials are under a lot of scrutiny, insurance companies are paying a different attention. So there's been a lot of changing dynamics when you're purchasing a condo, and these are all things that we really have to consider. Because remember, you're used to taking care of yourself and your stuff in your own place for a very long time, and when you move into a condo, you're handing over a lot of those decisions, financial and physical and mental decisions, to a group of other people to manage for you. And it gets a little scary. There are boards out there that don't jibe with everybody, and they have their own agendas. There are fees that come out of nowhere. There are special assessments that might happen. And there are general everyday increases to your cost of living and your condo fees. So these are all things that we really have to make sure we dive into and we look at very carefully before we move forward with downsizing to a condo. I think the thing we really got to focus on is making sure that there are no surprises. We spend a lot of time helping our clients analyze the buildings that they're interested in, analyzing the financials, making sure that a month, 2 months, a year after you move in, there's not this giant special assessment that they drop on you, or that all of a sudden you find out, hey, the pool's going to be closed for 6 months, the elevator's going to be renovated, we have to do our 40-year certification, and they're going to be jackhammering every day while you're enjoying your nice quiet space. I think we just want to make sure that we don't make any big mistakes. We can figure out the day-to-day and understand what the costs are going to be. We can help you with extra insurance that you might need. We can calculate your taxes. We know what your current maintenance fee will be when you walk in the door. But I think there's another level of due diligence that we have to do together to get really comfortable with going forward long-term and the stability of the building, the board, the physical stability of the building, not just the mental or financial stability of the building. There are certain buildings out there I think that people have to be careful about. There's a lot of older condos. And there's other ramifications that we don't even know about. Some of these older condos, they have so many challenges, they can't even get financing, which then limits the ability of other people to buy there, which may limit your potential property going up in value. So right now we're trying to think about what is the best fit for you in the best neighborhood, of course. But then once we get inside those neighborhoods, we're just trying to be very cautious to make sure that we are looking at the whole picture of the condo building. Some of the older ones, they have a lot of challenges. They don't have enough people living there to really have the right reserves. We have to make sure that we understand that and going forward. It's just our job as your realtor to help educate you on the risks of these new challenges that you're going to be facing. Lastly, we should probably talk about what is really the biggest challenge that I see. And this is a challenge I saw from my parents. This is a challenge I saw for myself actually when I moved home. It is letting go all this space that you've had. You've just become so comfortable in your space. You could close your eyes and navigate from the bedroom to the kitchen, get your water, get back in bed without even thinking about it. You close your eyes, you have memories of your kids, or you have parties or things that have happened in the spaces that you have. And even though we all know you don't use half those spaces anymore, letting go of them is something that is super, super hard for people to do. And sometimes I have people who have sold their bigger houses, moved to condos, and really realized they couldn't let go and they needed something bigger. So this is what we have to talk about and think about a whole lot and really mentally prepare you for. It is a shock to go from a big house to a condo, and it's not something that everybody is totally prepared for, and it's a lot of conversations we have about that. Because also remember, when you're talking about giving up space, you're talking about giving up things. And I find people having just a hard time giving up things as they do giving up the space. Oh, I bought this piece of art when I was on this trip. Me and my husband or my wife and I or my kids, we bought this and we bought that. We all know how much we collect. You open the garage, it's probably overflowing with stuff. So the idea that you're gonna have to downsize not just your house, but your stuff, probably by 10x, can be really overwhelming. But everybody manages it, everybody does it. There is a process, we know how to do it. We've done it for a long time for our clients. We can talk you off the ledge. We're great at holding your hand. We have an infinite patience, which is what I think this entire process takes. This is not a fast process. This is a process where you need to work with your family, work with your trusted advisors, work with a good realtor, take your time, work through all the contingencies, get everything in place so that when the time is right, you can make a seamless downsize transition. If you're in that window of even just starting to think about the idea of downsizing, I can't tell you how important it is at that moment to get somebody on your team that understands this and has done it for lots of clients so that we can start navigating all the things that I just talked to you about and getting comfortable with them even before you really get the whole ball rolling. I think it's important, and I think the more due diligence and the more work you do early, and this is something I've seen in my 25 years. I've talked to people for 1, 2, or 3 years in a row about what they needed to do to downsize. It takes patience, but there is a process, and we've done it a lot. So if you're ever really seriously thinking about making the move, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to come sit with you, walk through the process, tell you all the challenges, how we're gonna navigate all that. If you found this video useful, please drop me a comment below. I'd love for you to share this with someone else if you have anybody that you think it might be useful. And don't forget that every week we do another one, so please stay tuned. I'll see you on the next one.